hope you had a good lunch. I missed out on the chicken, so I didn't, but it's all right. It's all right. So I wanted to be at this level with you all because ideally I would love to turn this presentation at the end into us talking about ideas you want to build on and maybe brainstorm, how we can, how you might build it, how you might approach it, some ideas like that. A lot of times people come up to me and they ask me, okay, well I have some idea, but it's hard to do this for the blockchain or that. And I think what's kind of sad is all those conversations have a lot of repeating elements, but people don't necessarily hear those things. So I think it's cool to bring that out. But this presentation is really targeted towards, just getting started building. I mean, I think a lot of people, who here has built something in Polkadot ecosystem? That's anything from a website to a dApp to a contract to a pallet to a blockchain. Okay, well then this is unfortunately not the best presentation for you because the idea is a little bit more introductory. I mean, people here ideally could be building on Polkadot for the first time. I wanted to give a landscape of what kinds of libraries we have, what you can build in, some ideas on what you can build, and kind of get people started in just getting something going. I think the most difficult thing for building in Polkadot or for building in anywhere is just writing that first line of code, just getting something that you can tinker with and develop on, and that's kind of what I want to unlock here in this presentation. But again, what I would love is if there's so many hands raised for people who have been building, if there are challenges that you've seen in building or things that you want to talk about, I would love to turn that conversation into something we can do publicly. And then, of course, lead you all into the developer challenges we have here at sub0 so you can actually earn prizes and actually build the things you want. But anyway, let's get started. I wanted to go into a little bit about building into Polkadot. So first thing, I think one of the things we get wrong in the space is that everyone kind of assumes if you're building in Polkadot, you're probably building in these kind of first two, like the core and the runtime, right? But actually, I think the #1 thing Polkadot needs, more than more core developers and runtime developers right now, is actually more like web, mobile, desktop. I think that there are a lot of opportunities to build applications on top of things that we have existing, or even your own applications without having to necessarily go into the runtime and core level. And the reason why I suggest that is because the reality of the situation is when you're building in Polkadot, especially the way we expose it right now, launching a parachain, it can require a lot of team, it can require a lot of resources, a lot of efforts, and of course there are a lot of toolings to help that. But in terms of you're here at a hackathon, you want to get something done, if this is a new platform for you, this core and runtime piece can be very difficult. So I think it's interesting to see, okay, well, how can you just break out into the space? Can you learn about things about Polkadot while touching maybe platforms you're familiar with, right? Things you've done before. So I want to also mention here, so I'm going to go over some libraries that we have and kind of some of the things that you can use to get started building. But I want to clarify, I'm categorizing these kind of by targets. I say for example, TypeScript is kind of targeted for web. But let's be honest, you can build kind of any kind of application using TypeScript or any other language, right? These libraries are pretty much, as long as you can compile it down to the platform you want and make it run, it will work. So similarly, I have C# here as kind of a desktop application, but people make mobile apps with it, no problem. Same with webs, anything. So I just want to show that this is not a limitation, but just a categorization of the different platforms and how you can build these libraries. So overall, the kinds of things I think you would need to get started in any platform, and I think if anyone here is in DevRel or anyone here is trying to encourage more people to build in their ecosystem, you really want to first show what the libraries are, what tutorials they can follow, if any. I think that's really great. Examples that may go past tutorials that show all the different ways you can use a platform utility. And of course, ideas. You need to seed ideas to the ecosystem and also listen to ideas. Figure out what they want to build. See how they can actually work for your platform. So I'm going to present some of those things here across the different libraries we have. Right. And so what should you expect from a library in Polkadot? So if you're using a library in Polkadot SDK, you really should expect the following kind of properties. You should be able to access scale. This is our encoding format for basically how we encode objects into bytes and bytes back into objects. Our cryptography libraries, right? So all the ways you can basically sign messages. Our hashing algorithms, message signing. A big one is metadata. So if you're not familiar, inside of the Polkadot ecosystem, we have this thing called metadata, which is the ability for the node or the blockchain itself to describe kind of the APIs it exposes, the types it exposes, how to use it. And this is, again, what makes the Polkadot SDK very, very flexible and powerful, because basically you can build any application you want, and our libraries should handle automatically all of the things needed to expose those APIs or customizations to the end user. So really, again, a really nice quality library will actually say, hey, connect to your blockchain and I can immediately access your custom applications or custom primitives without having you to do anything else. And that's, again, all the magic of the metadata. You should be able to submit transactions, read storage, and ideally, not all libraries have this, but ideally they should support light clients. You know, one of the really important things we have in the Polkadot ecosystem is a light client first mentality. And what this means in terms of application developers is that, you know, if you are using a blockchain without light clients, you would ultimately rely on either, you know, syncing a full node yourself and exposing RPCs to your app, or connecting to other RPCs. You know, in the Ethereum world, this was famous with what's the name of their provider? Infura, right? So, and you know what's funny is we're trying to build these resilient, trustless systems. But if you build an app, right, which ultimately relies on some central Infura node, right, and then they block things like Tornado Cash or whatever kind of thing the government wants them to block, have we really built resilient, trustless applications? Not so much, right? So one of the things that we really emphasize in the Polkadot ecosystem is a support for light clients. You know, we have actually libraries that directly allow you to interact with Polkadot in a trustless way. You can basically have a mobile app or a web app, connect to a node, sync it, get all light client proofs, and then actually read and interact with that chain without having to rely again on centralized RPC nodes. But not all platforms support this. This is a little bit more complicated, but something that would be nice to have in all these libraries. So yeah, then I want to just walk through a little bit of the libraries just to make sure that you know the lay of the land, and then we can go a little bit more into some ideas and stuff like that, okay? So web development. So the first thing I would want to point out is, and I'm sure you've heard some presentations already in the weekend, we kind of have, I guess, these two competing, not competing, but like these two APIs. One you're probably very familiar with in the past is Polkadot.js API, but this new one, Pappy. And so, you know, I recommend you all try out using Pappy. Pappy just had a release, and it's very good, and it works very well, and there's been some talks about it already. But that's the one I'm going to focus on. The other one that might be less known about is actually SubXT. SubXT is a Rust-based library, but it allows you to build your projects into WebAssembly. And if you know, I mean, WebAssembly is a very important tool that we use inside of Polkadot. It is one of the things that allows us to have basically this flexible execution engine across all the different parachains. But WebAssembly was originally designed for web applications to make things run faster, right? And so actually you can, if you want to, build an entire web app using Rust, compiled to WebAssembly, and host it in the browser. So that's kind of one of the other examples I'll show you here in the next slides. But let's start with Pappy. So Pappy, the Polkadot API, is a pretty new API. As I understand, the primary focus with Pappy is that it was supposed to be, again, like light client, like super light client forward, and also multi-chain forward, right? So one of the other problems we had with the Polkadot.js, again, going back to the past, was that if you wanted to connect or do scenarios across multiple different blockchains, which is probably pretty common in the Polkadot ecosystem, it was actually very difficult to connect to all those different nodes and have them like work together seamlessly. Pappy is supposed to really, you know, redesign the libraries with, again, light client mentality first, but also the ability to connect to multiple chains and have those cross-chain scenarios work really simply. There are resources here. We actually have a cool tutorial. I'm going to open up some of these links as we go through the presentation. This was created by Nikos. And if you haven't seen, this is .code School. I'll talk about it more later, but they have a bunch of cool tutorials here, kind of owned by the community, and allow you to basically walk through building on Polkadot, getting started, in a way that's very friendly. So I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So let's open up this tutorial. This is for Pappy. And you can see here that every step in the tutorial is going to have some documentation, and then actually some code you can edit here. And ideally, if you go deeper, you'll see at some point it will show you that there is some solution, right? Like, so we see here there's some to-do statements. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. And you can actually show the answer here. You can see, like, compared to what was there and what you've written, the changes that you might need to make, and actually follow along the tutorial process. So I just mentioned this because this is one of the tutorials that we have for Pappy. Again, Pappy is a new library, so we're still working on getting more tutorials out there. But I also want to mention real quick that .code School is a cool place because you can actually build your own tutorials as well in this format and deploy it. And you get this nice kind of code development view. And yeah, I mean, it's great to have like kind of centralized sources where everyone can find high quality tutorials, right? Of course, we have documentation, and another one to look at is always examples. So if you're going to go try building on Pappy for the first time, beyond looking at the tutorials, you want to look at a bunch of other examples that they have here on how you can actually do stuff. Like, again, like play with ink, play with, I guess, bun, HTML stuff, etc. OK. So one other thing I want to show you is, again, another big thing in this space, again, is for me, is getting your first lines of code written. I don't know, getting an example working. And so one of the things that really unlocked for me in the space when I was working in Ethereum was just getting some basic queries and storage stuff happening inside of Ethereum. Like I wanted to see, okay, well, with one file, can I just use Web3.js, query Ethereum, get my balance? And it was funny because that was actually one of the projects that I had just submitted on GitHub, and it got a lot of people looking at it because people wanted the same thing. They just want to say, like, what is the minimum amount of work I can do to get something started, to actually start building? I think it's wrong to assume everyone here knows how to develop in Rust. Again, wants to build a full smart contract or wants to launch a whole parachain. Sometimes you just want to build cool UIs or cool interfaces where you can describe and get information. So one of the things I created recently using Poppy was this code sample. Again, I have a link to it. By the way, at the very end, I'll show here. So I have a link to this presentation here, a QR code at the front, and I have another one at the end, so you can see this presentation. But I have this this little code sample on CodePen here, and here there's just 50 lines of code, a lot of which is just text actually, and it shows basically how you can use Poppy to make a simple HTML page, which connects to a node and gets a bunch of properties from it, right? So here you can see, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Again, this is just really basics, but this can unlock people to just start building. So here you can see which node we're connected to, the number of decimals in the dot token, the fact that this is the dot token, we're connected to Polkadot, right? Our genesis hash. You can see here the latest finalized block, and it's updating every 6 seconds. You see that it's changing. So here you can already see how Poppy is able to subscribe to the storage, right? And then even get information about an account. So this is my account, and you can see my information on chain. And so I have in this sample, for example, you go here, you can change things, right? So if you want to, instead of connecting to Polkadot, connect to Kusama, all you have to do is change this, Kusama. And I think if we just let it load, it will reinitialize the page, reconnect to the RPC endpoint, and now we're connected to Kusama. And you see Kusama has a different number of token decimals, right? Has a different SS58 format, token symbol, etc. And so, I want to unlock in anyone's brain here, especially this. I'm targeting people who are not developers full time. Like if you're in biz dev, if you're in even marketing or whatever, it really is not so hard to actually get started building little tools inside of Polkadot, right? To build these little snippets. And you can imagine, well, if I can query someone's account, why can't I query someone's account over different blocks? Make a graph of that. Why can't I figure out who has the most balance, right? Of course, you can always go to SubXT or some other indexer to get this information. But why not unlock those kinds of things yourself? Create your own processes for being able to access this stuff. So if you look at this sample, again, only 50 lines. I have some to-dos here. You can change the account. You can change what you query. If you want to get the staking ledger or the vesting balances, all of that. And so again, I really encourage you all to maybe show a friend, show them how easy it is to actually start tinkering with Polkadot, right, in these ways. And so it's not too many lines different from this point to actually start submitting transactions, right? So, there are things people always say, okay, well, how can I create a utility that will actually vote for me on my behalf? Or how can I actually create something which, collects governance proposals, finds the ones that are, grifters or the ones that are really high quality, and automatically votes on them. You can imagine, again, it's not too many steps to actually create some kind of tooling inside of Polkadot from this kind of example, right? So that's the kind of power you can see with these simple JavaScript, TypeScript APIs. And again, you can either embed it inside of a browser or even make it a CLI, whatever is right for you. Yeah, and of course, again, we have the tutorial here that you can get started as well. All right, the other one I want to touch on real quick is SubXT. This is one, it's truthfully a little bit more powerful. Again, if you don't know, Polkadot SDK is built in Rust. And so, a lot of the libraries and types and tooling is all basically natively Rust, right? And so you're trying to say, okay, well, if I work in JavaScript, a lot of these libraries work, but you're kind of having to maybe either rebuild or, hope that someone has already rebuilt these tools in JavaScript for you. But actually, if you were to build a web app in Rust, you could actually more easily access a lot of the native tooling and native stuff we built inside the Polkadot SDK. So I wanted to show here that actually you can build web apps. I'll go through this example. Oh, no, I have a better example somewhere. Yeah, let me talk about this real quick. So you can actually use SubXT, which is a library for basically building against some straight nodes, like libraries, that will compile to WebAssembly, and then you can host again, locally, or you can even host it in a browser, right? So let me show you an example of this here. So the Web3 Foundation tech team recently just built this little UI. I think that they built just the first version of these apps. But you can see here, this is the website. It loads. Yeah, this is entirely built in Wasm. This is built in Rust, in Wasm, and is obviously hosted in the browser. You can go here, vesting. It's creating an online client. And here, you can replace the address below with the target account, and you can sign some message. And you can see, I'm not going to sign anything, but you can see here again that you can basically build exactly the full end-to-end UIs in there. So maybe you target a different audience. Like if you are a Rust developer who's never really built a lot of UIs or tooling, there are ways you can actually do it in Rust using these libraries and deploy it easily to the web, which is pretty cool. Okay. And then, yeah, so I think the primary way we've been using SubXT inside the ecosystem has been a lot more for CLIs. So you can see here a bunch of list of projects that have been built with SubXT. And things all along from like here, CLIs to claim staking rewards. So if you're a validator, you're probably running this in the background to automatically claim your staking rewards. This is the kind of app you can build. But also we have things here like, for example, there's a staking miner. So if you don't know this, actually, Polkadot uses a off-chain tooling for users to calculate what the best distribution of staking tokens are. And then we submit it on-chain and we validate it. This is what we call the fragment election system. And so the idea is that calculating who the best people to have the stake is a very complex problem. Like, I think order n squared. But to verify, once I have a set, how high quality the solution is a order n problem. So we actually create tooling, again, that runs on the client or locally, that is written in Rust, because it can handle all of the native Rust libraries that we built inside of staking. And then we're able to build something and then deploy it and push the information to the blockchain and have the chain verify it. So really what I'm trying to say here again is like, I'm really pushing examples here that there's so many apps and tools you can build in Polkadot that we need in Polkadot. It doesn't involve at all opening up Frame, making a new parachain or anything. That, in fact, there are so many interesting tools you can build just on the application layer, on just the usability layer, the CLI utility layer for Polkadot. Okay, so let's move on to mobile development. I'll show you some libraries there. So this might be a little bit biased, but when I think about great mobile apps, I really think about Nova. There are other libraries and other people building in the ecosystem, but I know that Nova, they have 2 great libraries for Android and iOS. And again, these libraries, they're not, how you say, like one-click build. I mean, obviously, if you've been building in Android or iOS, you probably have your own favorite libraries to use for either UI or making things simple. What these libraries are doing is what I mentioned earlier before. These libraries are going to give you access to scale, doing all the encoding, the hashing functions, cryptography, submitting transactions, etc. All the crazy stuff that would be very hard to implement in a normal app without this, trying to talk to Polkadot, right? So these kinds of Android and iOS libraries is all about, okay, well, I made a beautiful app. I have all the functionalities. I have all my screens. I have all the buttons. How can I make this button submit a transaction to Polkadot? Well, if you use these Android and iOS libraries, you can make that really easy and really simple. You can load the key. You can sign the message. You can submit the transactions to the different nodes. So this is a really cool one. Okay, and I wanted to show that, Nova has been working also on presenting a lot of different various apps and SDKs. So I think another way you can get inspired in terms of building for different mobile applications is to look at the Nova wallet that they've built and the Android wallet. Again, these are different than their actual SDKs. And actually see how they have built and integrated, for example, all these different features on how they've integrated with, let me start with features. They have added this quick voting system, the ability for you to just go and swipe left and right to be able to vote, staking system, the ability to like lock, unlock tokens, vest and unvest your tokens, all those things, there's kind of templates for that already built into their app. So I think this is a great way that you can actually, again, don't build from scratch. Use the existing libraries, use the existing examples, and be able to build some application, right? Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about desktop development. So for this, again, it's funny to talk about desktop because you pretty much can use any of the libraries I described before for building on desktop, right? You just, if you want to use TypeScript or whatever, use Poppy, put it into a CLI or put it into some, other library for your desktop, and you can run an app. But there are some interesting kind of more, I guess, desktop-friendly libraries. I'm thinking again about C#, .NET, and Unity. And obviously Python as well here too. So if you didn't know, we actually have this Unity library, which is, again, integrating directly into building a game and being able to access these low-level APIs. Again, the mistake is that this library doesn't, for example, add new assets or doesn't create cool Polkadot, graphics or whatever. It's all about inside of Unity being able to access the cryptography, signing messages, hash functions, etc. So let's go look at some of the libraries. So the Unity SDK is owned by a team called Polkadot Play. They're a treasury-funded team. And they were, I think, kind of spun out from Ajuna Network, who have been working on basically building the .NET libraries and building games. And yeah, I think one of the cool things we can actually do in the ecosystem, especially with the growth of teams like Mythos, is actually bring people into Polkadot by making these fun, compelling games which have some kind of blockchain integration. And I think one of the key things in terms of building blockchain games is not making it a blockchain-first game. It should be a game-first game, right? And it should integrate blockchain as a high-level tool for enabling kinds of scenarios. For example, ownership of assets, permissionless trading, additional marketplaces, or even just verifying or like access passes to certain things. I think one of the mistakes I see when people come up to me is that they want to break out into blockchain development by taking a game that works really well on the computer, on a single computer, and then turn all of that code into a smart contract or into a pallet. But what we know is that blockchain systems are really inefficient. Not inefficient by mistake, inefficient by design. If you want to have a blockchain, or if you want to have a decentralized system which has redundancy, multiple different computers running this thing and verifying that it's correct, what you end up having to do is you're going to have to use more processing power, more energy, more costs to make the game work. Especially with blockchain systems, blockchains also have the limitation where basically you have a limited window in how much you can actually execute. So your game also will need to split its execution into these kind of block-sized pieces to run well, right? So all of these things make building a game, which the core execution on the blockchain is actually what's running, very difficult. Now, it's not impossible, and it's not something that I discourage, especially it's fun to try. You'll actually learn a lot about blockchain scaling by trying to do that. But what I actually encourage is build a great game taking advantage of the things that blockchain does best, which is like game theory, economics, ownership, perhaps, maybe I don't want to use the word gambling, but perhaps some kind of betting system where you can actually challenge individuals, right? For example, if I were to build a chess application, I probably wouldn't build the logic of the chess app on the blockchain. I would probably build an app where users sign messages back and forth to each other, like basically on a on like a lightning network, right? Some kind of side chain. They could play the whole game, and then whoever won the game can submit the proof to the chain that the game was resolved. You obviously do not want every single transaction for every chess move to be on the blockchain, for users to wait every 6 seconds. I mean, probably they will wait for chess. For all of the logic for how a rook moves or how a horse moves, based off of the contract code. All you want to do is be able to have a verification layer happen on the blockchain. And then, of course, tying it to like tokens and other assets. That's the kind of thing that makes sense, right? So this is the way to think about it. And I think, again, this is the trap that people fall into. How to use the blockchain as a verification layer, as a consensus layer, not as a cloud execution layer, right? Okay. And then the other one I'll talk about is Python. So I think the reason I put this on there is, again, I'm targeting a lot of people to see this presentation who perhaps have never programmed in Polkadot before. And I think what I know from different universities is that a lot of people, they learn Python in university if you're going to computer science. So I think you should know that we have these awesome Python libraries. And so, again, an example like the one before here with Pappy on how you can just basically make a simple, small number of lines, query the storage, make a transaction, interact the basics of blockchain. All of that can be done with Python as well. I really, I think an example of an idea you can have in the Python space is, if let's say you're a really passionate person inside of governance, right? And you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how are we spending money? How are we, allocating different things? Which accounts are getting the most money, allocated to them? Who are the new proposers? All that kind of stuff. All of that can be easily queried on chain, allocated together, and using Python libraries, which get these beautiful graphs and these beautiful analytics. This is the kind of thing I think that would be a great starting app for in the Polkadot ecosystem. And also can bring a lot of value. Again, if you make a great Python UI, which has all this information, you can then join these governance talks, show this information, and allow us to make better decisions, I think what we really need in a lot of the coordination systems is just more data. And so, again, Python is all about, as I understand, a lot of verticals is collecting and parsing data, and you can do that really easily with these Python libraries. Okay, now I want to go to contract development. So one of the things we are working on, so there are presentations about Ink already, and I'll talk a little bit about Ink. But one of the things we've been trying to push towards in the Polkadot ecosystem is going to the developers, right? So it's funny enough, the history of Solidity, I mean, in some way traces back to Gav, and Gav, obviously is very tied to launching in Polkadot. But I think the vibe when I first joined Polkadot was that Solidity was definitely not the best VM, or the EVM at least was not the best VM environment for contracts. I think we can talk about all of its quirks, right? Like the 256-bit for everything, 20-byte addresses, these specific cryptographic libraries, like oh my gosh, what's the one? Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Basically, the EVM is a little bit strange in some ways. But I think the fact is that EVM was kind of the first to come out. Solidity was one of the first languages to really get adopted. And we find a lot of developers building in Solidity. So one of the challenges, or one of the things we've been focusing on, especially with the PokaVM, which if you've heard some talks, and there'll be definitely more tomorrow, is that we want to make sure that we are bringing Solidity compatibility to these platforms. So I want to make a clarification here. In the future, you will, and already with things like Moonbeam you can, but in the future with things like the PokaVM and the Asset Hub or the Polkadot Hub, you'll be able to bring Solidity contracts directly to Polkadot, but not with the EVM, but with an EVM compatible layer. And then Ink and then Move are also other platforms. So let's talk about these in a little bit. So I shouldn't need to explain much about Solidity. Solidity is a great language. There's a lot of great tutorials in the ecosystem. The one that actually got me started programming Solidity is CryptoZombies, and I'm glad to hear that actually still is one of the most relevant tutorials out there today. CryptoZombies actually is the inspiration for kind of this view that you see in .code school. They have exactly this kind of learn on one side, program on the other, and get started. So I definitely recommend if you've never done anything inside of blockchain, even before you start building inside of Polkadot and building palettes, I would say start building smart contracts, because there's a lot of translatable material you can have from building a smart contract to building a palette and eventually building a whole blockchain. And there are a lot of great docs. So I don't need to get started there. Especially another one is OpenZeppelin. OpenZeppelin has a lot of great examples and templates for how you could basically launch a contract right out of the box. And then Ink. Man, I messed up the tutorial here. But Ink actually is a language that came out of parity and in the Polkadot ecosystem as a way to try to improve the mistakes of the EVM and the Solidity language itself. So Ink is actually a language which is based on Rust. We call the Rust EDSL, and basically allows you to basically program smart contracts in ways as close to Rust as possible. Let me see if I can find an example. So there's actually great examples here for Ink versus Solidity in terms of feature set and how you could build a contract. But you can see here an Ink contract, if you're familiar with Rust, looks just like Rust, but it has these kinds of sneaky macros in here, which does all the things needed to basically parse a Rust project into a contract. And yeah, we actually have great examples. Right, we have Bruno, he's here in the audience. He made a tutorial actually creating the first Ink smart contract with Pop Network. And so I think if you were here earlier, you see there's a lot of tooling and CLIs to try to make contract development using Ink very simple and easy. And again, I think one of the things that is powerful with Ink is if we know we want to train Rust developers inside the Polkadot ecosystem, and if we believe that Rust is a powerful language for actually building blockchain systems, they need a place to get started, right? Sometimes building a palette or building a blockchain can be very tough, but building your first smart contract shouldn't be tough, right? And so having a Rust-forward language for you to actually build a smart contract is super relevant and super important. Actually, let me ask Bruno, is there a top tutorial that you recommend for Ink right now that's kind of in the light of CryptoZombies? Is it this one right here? Learn on pop.io. So remind me, I'll update this slide here. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. And then, okay, I will talk a little bit about runtime development. This is kind of, I think, the most powerful tool at the end, and will get you kind of to unlock the full power of Polkadot. So without saying much, if you're going to build in the runtime, I think probably you're going to want to learn Frame. Frame isn't a new language necessarily. It is a set of libraries and SDKs on top of Rust to be able to actually program and use more easily the tools of the Polkadot SDK and what Polkadot provides. The idea being that if you want to launch your own blockchain, launch your own applications, get direct access to a lot of block space that is secure, resilient, scalable, that you can tap directly into basically the core primitives of what Polkadot provides and launch something with these different frame runtimes. And yes, for that, I already mentioned Code School. We actually have a few tutorials now on directly building for the runtime. I would recommend you would start with the Rust state machine. This actually will teach you, without any frame or Polkadot-specific concepts, how to build a state machine in Rust and give you ideas of basically rebuilding Substrate or the Polkadot SDK in your head. And then the Substrate Kitties tutorial. This is basically building a NFT marketplace. If you've been in the Polkadot ecosystem for a while, you might have heard about Substrate Kitties. It's a very old tutorial. But actually, pretty recently, I updated the whole thing. And so it's totally up to date with the latest in Polkadot SDK, and is built in a way to be much more maintainable. So again, you can go into here, start a lesson, and you can see actually like things like, okay, we're going to teach you all the basics of creating a storage value inside of a runtime, and have code here which shows you, okay, this is what you need to do to fix this code and make it work. And you can run this all locally, and we even have tests to show you exactly how, to make sure that your code is all working well. And so this is the kind of thing where you can really get started simply, just have a weekend and hack on the runtime. And again, I think my main takeaway is once you've written your first lines of code and get something working, I think it really unlocks the possibilities of what you can build next, right? And actually get you started building in the ecosystem. Here's Code School, a lot of different tutorials available and stuff. So now I want to take a little bit of a switch. If I was going to build an app in a hackathon on Polkadot, I probably would target this thing which I'm making a name here, stateless verifiable applications. So what is a stateless verifiable application? So stateless. This is the application that does not necessarily maintain its own storage on-chain. It doesn't need any on-chain storage. To read data, you need to look through the block history. You can usually do that by resyncing the chain, basically parsing the chain, or archiving all the information locally. That makes it stateless, kind of. And then verifiable. It has some kind of well-defined rules, not necessarily, again, on-chain, but something that's a protocol simple that you can actually explain to anyone. Anyone can resync this stateless data, parse it, and follow the rules, and get the latest state. So in many ways, this is kind of basically using the blockchain as a communication protocol to permissionlessly communicate data from across different people, and then for anyone to be able to run the application locally to make it work. And so what does this really actually manifest as? It's this thing called inscriptions. Have you heard of inscriptions? This was a really hot topic. I think it brought billions of dollars of value to Bitcoin when it was announced. This is not a new idea. This is exact same thing. It's a stateless verifiable application. And I want to note here that this stuff can be done anywhere. So it's kind of in some ways a hack. It is basically using a blockchain, again, as a kind of permissionless communication protocol and hacking an app on top of it. Now, this is not the best way to build an app, but it's definitely a valid way, and one I think works really well for something like a hackathon, like a 2 weeks or 2 days. You want to build something quick. This is something that works really well. So, who here has heard about remarks? Yeah, remarks it's a weird extrinsic. The summary of this here is that it does nothing. It literally takes some input, some bytes, and then it assigns it to nothing, it drops it in memory, and then says okay. And this is actually a tool we've had since the beginning of Polkadot, since the very first day we launched Polkadot, that allows people to inscribe data onto Polkadot. It's funny how much marketing can really change the way that these different features are. We've had inscriptions on Polkadot since day one, and you can build anything you want to build with inscriptions on Bitcoin, also on Polkadot. The thing we have more recently, which is a little bit more useful, is this remark with event. This is the ability to submit a remark and also emit an event from Polkadot. Basically, it's a more easy signal to find that this remark has happened. So imagine, again, if you have, let's say, a remark, it's tied in some kind of XEM call, which is tied inside of a batch or whatever. If you want to just see the remark has happened, this is an easier way to find it instead of having to parse all this data and look for the remark inside of a batch, inside of an XEM, etc. And so this allows anyone to basically embed some data on the blockchain, on Polkadot, and allow anyone to recognize it. So let's talk about one idea you can build with this inscription idea. So this is a classic Web 2 app. This was some kid, he said, how am I going to make my first $1 million? I'm going to sell each pixel on a 1,000 by 1,000 canvas for $1 each, right? And you get people and they host it on this website, $1 million homepage. And you can see people here posting their different ads and stuff on this website. Reddit took this and has, I'm not sure it's every year, but definitely for a few years, had this thing called Places, where it's almost the same thing. It's like basically this battle arena. Anyone with a Reddit account can go, click some pixels, change some stuff, and update the image. Well, when Polkadot, or when I guess Kusama launched, we were thinking about ways that we can basically play with Kusama, get people to do transactions, make sure that the network works. And so I had built 5 years ago this idea, 1 million remarks, which basically follows the principles of a stateless app. You can see here I have defined a protocol. Basically, submit a remark where the first 4 bytes of the remark are 1337, and then the next 3 bytes describe in decimal the location on a 1000 by 1000 grid, so anything from 0 to 999, the x and y coordinates, and then using the hexadecimal representation of a hex color, right? So that's 6 hex digits for a color. And if you submit that remark on chain, we will use a stateless application to parse that and make basically an image of that. And you can see that actually recently, just a year ago, this was rediscovered. You can see this was actually the canvas that we created. So people were creating different images and different bots, I guess, to make this and submit the data to the blockchain, and then we were able to create an image from it. If you go to Kusama today, you can synchronize the blockchain, look for these remarks that follow this pattern with 1137, and you can recreate this image. So let me, again, give you the idea of a stateless, verifiable app. This application did not require me to build a palette, didn't require me to launch a contract, didn't require me to store any data on Polkadot in some kind of custom palette storage. It took advantage of the fact that Polkadot exposes a way for me to inscribe data on the blockchain publicly, right? And anyone who synchronizes this blockchain can go and look and find these remarks with this byte format in the front. And then if they know the rules of this game, right, basically take the pixel location and then the color, they could on their own generate this image. In this case, how do you say this? It's like we made an app which in some ways has some principles of blockchain or Web3, right? It's not something you have to trust that this image is the one that's correct. You can yourself resync the image and make sure it works, right? And by avoiding this, we don't have to store, for example, if you were to build this as a palette on Polkadot, you would need to store 1 million colors into storage somewhere, right? This is not a good use of the block space necessarily, right? Especially for a fun weekend application, right? So here's an idea already of what you can build. And I want to mention here that actually we have a proposal in Polkadot and Kusama to do something called the spamming. I don't know if you heard about that. We want to basically spam the Polkadot and Kusama relay chain and the parachains to see how much transaction volume they can handle under real-world conditions. And actually, we're going to relaunch the 1 million remarks as a way to help that. So as we're spamming things with bots, we also want to have some challenges where you can actually go and submit pixels and on-chain and basically be part of the spamming. Basically spam these remarks on-chain and be a part of it. And also, again, not to just spam for no reason, but to actually get your image hosted on the blockchain. So I want to actually show this image actually exists on Rococo today. It looks very beautiful. Obviously, it was done by a bot. It's here today. And if you look, if I can get close, the one problem is there's a lot of optimizations. Okay, I should clarify this. Kareem here is saying there's a lot of optimizations and important improvements to make this actually usable on the browser. But this is the page, totally loaded, using a Web3 canvas. And I want to scroll in without it dying on me. But if you look, at least on my screen, there's some white pixels here. So you can actually use this UI right now, submit some dots, submit a transaction on the blockchain, and it works. It all works. So this is the kind of ideas you can build. Okay, so yeah, so the formula here. Define a protocol for your application. Make a front end using the library, any of the ones we described before, right? Create an indexer using another library, right, for actually indexing these things. And then, yeah, essentially deploy the indexer. Have somewhere you can basically, someone can query it. But then tell the users, you do not have to rely on my centralized deployment. This is not the right way. If you do not trust what I have written, if you do not trust my image, run the indexer yourself locally and get your own image. Okay. So that was just an idea of how you can build some stuff. So I want to show some more ideas on how you can get started, and then maybe, again, turn this into a conversation, see if anyone has stuff that we can talk about. So we have a lot of different resources on how you can actually find your next Web3 project. One is called Build on Dot. So let's open this up real quick. Build on Dot is a website. Oops. Let me just, I think I have it open already. Basically, we have a collection of, this is brand new, by the way, so it only has about 20 ideas, but anyone can submit their own ideas here. We have ideas for things that you can build in the Polkadot ecosystem, right? And things that people want to see in the ecosystem. So again, I think it would be hard, for example, let's find one of these things. It would be hard, for example, to build a universal basic income on a weekend, right? But I think if, for example, you wanted to build some kind of reputation system, this is actually something that's not too difficult. Again, it wouldn't necessarily be an on-chain reputation system, but you can absolutely use the existing libraries, parse the history of governance proposals, parse the history of who submitted transactions, create some kind of off-chain network, and parse that all together and present that information in a front-end or UI. And that would be useful. And then think about, okay, well, how can I take those ideas and perhaps bring some of them on-chain in some future, right? So this is one. We also have morekudos.com. This is another one. Let's go here. This is another source for looking for ideas, not just in Polkadot, but across ecosystems. And this one is really focused on not only finding you ideas to work on, but also getting you paid. So I think they have this whole platform of trying to earn money from your contributions to these ecosystems. So these are a little bit less about building applications, but perhaps solving problems within different ecosystems. So if you have a parachain team, you should definitely be using more kudos to display any kind of early ideas or anything that you want people to develop on your chain. And then finally, we have some wish lists. So if you go to the actual Polkadot SDK repo itself, there are wish lists for developers and for users, which are full lists here. Let me find it on GitHub, of ideas that we would like to see in the ecosystem. So things that have been closed and open, and of course, you can submit your own ideas as there as well. So I think there's no excuse, actually. My summary in this presentation, there's no excuse, after looking at all these things, to not find some idea and find some way to build it in a hackathon-friendly way using the libraries you're familiar with, and then to learn about Polkadot in that way, and then to iterate and build on that better. One more idea I've been trying, this is also pretty new here, is how can we get people paid for building cool apps, right? So this is the big one. Like, obviously, hackathons are great because they have some sponsorship and prizes for building an ecosystem, but how can we make every day a hackathon day? How can we make it so if you build a cool app that you can actually get paid for that? So I have here in the Polkadot Developers Organization this thing called the Bounties repo. And the idea of the Bounties repo is that Polkadot already has a mechanism for submitting tips. And tips are basically ways you can get the treasury to pay you small amounts for things you've done. And this Bounties repo is basically a way for you to create things in the ecosystem, submit those ideas to here, have them be reviewed by a curated set of users in the Polkadot ecosystem, including myself. And basically, if you built something cool, let's get you paid for it. Let's get you some money into your hands. So this tip bot, basically, we have integrated here, can go, and you can basically submit, okay, I did some work. I created this thing. And then we can say, okay, I want to tip someone. Oh, sorry, let me go to the pull requests. Make this a little bit bigger as well. So this was just a simple example, and I was testing it myself. So I went and I updated some instructions to ZombieNet. I went to the documentation, I changed the text, I made it better, and I submitted it. Evidence of that change can be found in this pull request right here. You can see. This is the instructions. It got merged, and I have my address here. Now, obviously, this wouldn't be tipping myself, but you would go and do something like this. You would submit this proof of having done something. And then someone like myself can go and review this and say, hey, it's good. And I can say tip small. And here, the bot would actually submit a tip to the blockchain for 20 DOT or whatever and get you paid for that. So the bot has small tips, medium tips, large tips. Small tips, I think, are 20 DOT. Large tips are 200 DOT. But you can build ideas or contribute anywhere in the ecosystem, submit to us what you've done, and get paid for it. The main thing that the Bounties program is trying to solve here is it can be very challenging and very scary to go to the treasury and say, hey, pay me, right? Like, I'm some brand new guy, I made some website, pay me. But I think what we're trying to facilitate in the developer ecosystem here is ways for users to get started, right? We see value in updating docs. We see value in you making small apps. We see value in you getting started in your journey. And we can have basically the backing of Parity devs or Polkadot developers to actually vouch for you and say, hey, this was cool. Let's get some dot in your hands and get you building more, get you encouraged to do more, right? And again, what's nice is that because this is all peer-reviewed, it's not really gameable. Like, I'm not incentivized to just spend money on random people. We're looking to actually get this into the hands of new builders, get them encouraged, get them some dot in their hands, and get them to build bigger and bigger projects. So again, if you actually build a project, even outside of this hackathon, you can get paid for doing that, submit it over into the Bounties repo. Yeah, and of course, you can also get paid immediately. We have challenges every night, all through sub0. So this was, again, my overall idea of how kind of you can get started in the ecosystem. Start with the libraries you're familiar with. Build things which aren't crazy. Don't necessarily have crazy ambitions of building a parachain or even building a full palette, tomorrow. Start with the things that you're familiar with. Learn about Polkadot in those ways. You'll learn a lot about Polkadot just building any kind of these apps. Deploy something simple, even if it's not perfectly in line with the blockchain fundamentals. It can still be fun. Get paid for those ideas, and build. So, first, any questions about what I posted here? Any comments? If not, what I would love to do, with just the time we have left, if anyone has an idea for a project that they want to build, or an idea, like having just seen this, like what's something that you could get paid $100 for? I would want to hear that idea, and maybe we could talk about what libraries would be good to use, the style, could we make it a verifiable app, could we build this in a weekend, that kind of thing. Does anyone have any ideas? We got one? Thank you.
I think we could build a UI on top of the bounties thing that you have. Probably, so something similar to what Solana has for earn.superteam.fun. Maybe you could.
Yep. Okay, so let's open up. So there's earn. Let's see. Tell me the URL. Earn super what? Super team. Yeah. Okay. Solana. Okay. Okay. So this is the thing. So the idea here is, okay, we should make a nice UI for bounties, which I definitely agree. By the way, again, the #1 focus here, there's a lot of things we can do in Polkadot just to make our UI and UX better. So this is a way for a bunch of people to post bounties, it seems like, with some amount, and for people to actually submit them. One thing that's slightly different with at least my idea of the bounties system, a lot of people, again, you can open issues here, and I think we're looking for requests, and we should have some dollar amount here. But what's challenging with this is, where do the funds come from, right? So when you look at this, I assume that these different teams are funding these amounts, right? One of the things that's nice about the bounty system is that you can get the money from the treasury, right? But then who decides how much a project is worth? That's a challenging part. So maybe some ideas we should think about is like, okay, how can we, once someone submits a idea or request into the bounties, maybe some mechanism for the curators to come to some average of how much this is worth, right? And then it would turn it into something on the UI. And then ideally, when someone submits the project, then they can get paid that amount. Yeah, but I would say, one of the challenging parts of decentralized funding in this context is because it's through the treasury, someone third party needs to basically say how much something is worth or be paid for, and that's a challenge, right? Again, this for me screams layers of centralization in terms of how these amounts and funding comes from, and I think we should look for more trust or more decentralized methods.
I have an idea for that.
Yeah.
So
let's go.
Just to add on to that, like it could just be like a feed of like work. So if you accomplish any work on Polkadot, just post it there.
Exactly.
It's not guaranteed that you're going to get anything, but maybe you will.
Actually, so that is much more my vibe. I think the bounties is exactly that. I think it should not be, like, for example, anyone should just submit anything to this repo, and maybe you don't get paid for it. That shouldn't be discouraging. You may just say, like, oh, you need to do more work, or it wasn't big enough. But just post stuff in here and get paid. I think that we're, in general, encouraging people to, we're probably leaning on the side of paying you more often than not, just to encourage you to keep building the ecosystem. So yeah, some nice UI here would be great. How about other app ideas? Is anyone building anything for the challenges this weekend? Okay. How about right here? Yeah.
Yeah. So
take the mic.
Thanks. Yeah, we thought about building some game for a hackathon that's coming up. Like there will be some, I think it's parity internal, but afterwards there will be some more public hackathon on smart contracts on West End. Yeah, we thought about doing some game, but I think your slides were pretty good about highlighting that it's just about verification and about tracking possible assets and not like re-executing the game logic possibly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what kind of game were you thinking?
We were thinking about some tower defense. I mean, something that's like, possibly turn-based, but I mean, it shouldn't feel like a blockchain game. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
will hopefully be able to make it very responsive.
So I think game is a good one to unpackage some ideas around. So when building a game for blockchain, I think the best thing that will help you is designing a game which works well with the blockchain ideas, right? So when I think about blockchain, a game that doesn't quite work well is one where you need some constant running process in the background, which is constantly updating the world state, and basically needing some kind of like constant logic to detect what's going on here. A better game would, for example, be some kind of like turn-based game where the decision or the effects of a decision enact immediately after a transaction happens, right? And the reason why this is good is because basically you don't require some kind of long-running process running in the background for users to interact with the chain. There can be lots of different lag stuff. So let's give an example. So I think chess would make a lot of sense because you make an action, and a lot of the thinking or the time delay comes from the user thinking about their next action, not necessarily the chessboard evolving. Another one is card games, right? Any kind of card game is not like, in a tower defense game where you have like basically people coming in, you need to constantly real-time update what's going on. You actually just have the ability to like, okay, I play a card, I draw a card, whatever, and all the thinking and the action kind of is on the player, right? This is another one. When you think about games for blockchain, it does probably make sense for you want the user to be the number one computer, right? Not the blockchain. You do not want, for example, the user to press one button and the blockchain to calculate all of these complex formulas to figure out what happens, right? Like I would say maybe a good example of that is like is a first-person shooter, right? The user clicks a trigger, and then all this graphics and ray tracing and all this stuff is used to figure out, does the bullet hit the person? This is taking all the computation and bringing it, if it was built on the blockchain, to the blockchain. That's not a great kind of game design for a blockchain system. Instead, what you want is that the blockchain has a very simple response. Like, I place my piece here. Okay, all I have to do is store the piece was here. And all the complex logic comes from the user. So then, again, going from like chess, you can think about like games like Go, right? Where Go, there is some logic about how you switch the tiles from like black or white. But a lot of the core thinking and a lot of the thing comes from the end user, right? So that's the kind of games I think would make a lot of sense. That being said, again, if we had a tower defense game and it was constantly running, I'm trying to think how you would represent that. I mean, I guess the best thing would be to have some kind of formulaic story about how the game is going to progress with the enemies and have it be tracked on block number, right? So then your local computer would be able to, populate the current state of the tower defense without having to rely on the blockchain to give it like a specific information. A roll-up? Yeah, okay, roll-up. But I mean, again, this is the kind of thing where if you do a roll-up, it's just going to be so, you can't build it in a weekend. I think that what I'm saying is I think you could build a tower defense in a weekend.
If you are using the just tower defense game code, you might be able to convert into a roll-up in a weekend.
I think you could convert it to a roll-up. I think the average new developer maybe not. You have another idea? Bruno,
So
could you
different
get
idea.
Yeah.
There was a Polkadot forum post a while back about blinks. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, blinks are great. Yeah, let's find it.
I thought that was a great example. I got really excited about that, and I feel like it's such a tangible example for like outside people that aren't familiar with the blockchain space, right? Like,
Yeah.
So
What is blinks? So let's summarize real quick. As I understand, blinks are these blockchain links, but the kind of manifestation of it is basically you could be scrolling on Twitter, and instead of just seeing image of like click here, do something, you could actually click a link inside of the Twitter box, which actually does some action. So, for example, let's say that you want to donate to a nonprofit or whatever. Instead of you having to click the image, go to the site, press it, while scrolling on Twitter, you can click a single button, donate one dot, and it would open up a prompt and submit that transaction all in one spot, right? What is the state of Blinks? Why isn't this something that we've done? The truth is, Blinks I also saw first from Solana, right? But I've never actually seen a Blink in my timeline.
yeah, there's some in that post it lists like the limitations, the constraints. But I would love to see this live.
Sure. So this is a great one. I think if anyone has familiarity with like the Twitter APIs or just building these kinds of embedded apps, that would be a great one. Does anyone have any other ideas or wish lists they would want to see? Yeah. Can we bring the mic over to the right?
I think one idea was something similar to AirChat, but for OpenGov referenda, to have a conversation asynchronously.
Oh,
So-
there we go. Okay, so
Yeah.
so basically you want to use you want to create a permissionless chat platform on top of Polkadot,
Yep, but voice-based chat.
voice-based.
Yep.
Okay, voice-based. And so in your idea here, where do you think would be the best place to host those sound files, like IPFS or?
I'm not sure. Haven't
Yeah, so
thought that.
that would be the so definitely having a chat-based app would make a lot of sense. And actually, probably you could use the same framework for stateless apps for building a chat system. So basically, I could imagine already, if you wanted to have a user remark, have a parsing thing. This is a chat message about this referenda, and here's the text. You could probably parse this and create a bunch of different chats. Now the question would be, okay, where do we get the file? You could probably get the hacky method would be use some kind of centralized data storage to store the file somewhere, and then have some kind of short link embedded into the remark that will then find the file on the cloud and then host it, right?
Yeah, or what we could do is use
Or
something like DeepGram to transcribe it and have the transcription
Okay, there you go.
made of make a hash out of it and store that on the chain.
Okay, so that's the idea. So the idea then is talk into your phone, it turns into text and then uses it here, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that all makes sense. I think that any kind of remark is perfect for any kind of decentralized communication. Like this is a way for you to without any type of censorship, be able to submit a message, and if you have the right kind of tagging, be able to collect the messages together and have like threads, replies, back and forth, anything. So yeah, I think that will definitely work. Yeah, another idea?
Yeah, I've been thinking about like DeFi protocol product.
Yeah.
Like imagine again borrowers and lenders, but in this case the borrower can get this like a credit score verification on chain.
Okay.
So we can use like a blockchain to provide a credit score verification.
Yeah.
There are some solutions like a Reclaim protocol. They are like, for example, take some proof of like a user from Binance, OKX, and more like other source. So this kind of like a verification credit score can provide some info to the main DeFi protocol.
Yeah.
And then another extra feature could be like we can create some kind of like market where the borrower can, like a request for a term, let's say like 5% of interest or 2% of interest, depends of the situation. There might be like some like lenders that can accept or not this kind of like a request for loan. So it's like a lot of ideas you need to set up together. But yes, I've been thinking about something like this and how to build like on Polkadot. Yeah.
So I would actually want to take this idea one step back. What you described about reputation doesn't apply to just DeFi. Reputation is actually trying to solve the Sybil problem, right? How can you actually, an account is an account, but anyone can create millions of accounts. As soon as you have reputation, it becomes a more meaningful system, right? A more meaningful kind of account where you can actually say, well, it's hard to create an account with a high reputation. And this is not only useful for DeFi, it is obviously useful for DeFi, but useful for governance, useful for any kind of system where you need to reduce the noise, right? So okay, now the question, how do you create a reputation system? I think that there is a lot of work being done in big teams to build reputation systems at the protocol level. Even inside of Polkadot with the individuality project that Gav's working on, the proof of personhood stuff, there's going to be a lot of reputation systems built there. But do we have to wait years for this stuff to happen? Can we build solutions right now that can work kind of part way? I think the answer is yes. I think that what we're missing, like the first milestone for Polkadot in terms of reputation would be someone to create a stateless verifiable reputation app. This is, for example, imagine you create an app which tries to identify, how high quality a person is. So let's say this is for governance, right? So we can attach someone's GitHub and their identity information that's on chain, go through, see how many contributions they've made across stuff, how many proposals they voted on, if they've posted on the Polkadot forum, if they've posted on this stuff, build that kind of large reputation, right? And generate the number. Now what can happen is this team can have a centralized listing of everyone's reputation, and you can reference it. So if someone comes to a proposal and says, hey, I'm asking for $1 million, go check out this website. I have high reputation, probably you should say yes. But you shouldn't trust it. If they built this protocol correctly, it should be that I can download the same CLI, run it myself, and verify the reputation that was calculated correctly, right? Using public tooling. I think that we don't have this, but this is the first step. Like before you start thinking about building a palette which does this and building all this crazy online chain logic, why can't we just build a stateless application which does it? I'll be able to individually verify, and then go from there. And then what we start to realize is that we can start using this app, and we can say, okay, well, these reputation criteria aren't actually very helpful because they had high reputation here, but they were actually still grifting the treasury, or they were still bad loans, right? Yeah. And so we can actually start tuning already which kinds of factors are most relevant, right? And then when you go to actually build this on the blockchain, you already have more insight into what are the relevant criteria and information to have. Now, the one challenge translating an idea like a stateless verifiable app to a blockchain is the Oracle problem, right? So one of the things about building reputation is like, okay, if I post on the forum, if I have, an active community member, all that kind of stuff. Bringing all the information from the outside world onto the blockchain is difficult. So usually for DeFi products, you only look at on-chain data, like their previous history of spending money and borrowing and stuff. But I think that I would hope that when the time comes that reputation systems are really working well, Oracle systems will also be in place, and we can actually solve that other aspect as well. How does that sound? I mean, so I would say if you're trying to think about this, I think you should build a stateless verifiable application for the basic idea of building a basic reputation. And then, for example, have lenders reference this when they accept approved loans with users, right? Yeah, that's an idea.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I think I ran out of time here, but I'm going to be around for a little while. If you have an idea you want to pitch to me, I can give you feedback on how maybe to approach it. I would actually love, if you built something in the past with Polkadot, I would be happy to support a bounty, retroactive bounty. So if you submit something here with some proof of what you've built in the past, and then talk to me, I'll go and review it, and I'll try to get some DOT in your hands. And otherwise, I just want to say that, I hope that as complicated and as awesome as Polkadot can be, that you don't let that limit you, that there's a lot of different verticals on which you can start building in Polkadot, and you should take what you already know, or where you want to grow, build an idea, and just get started. Don't worry too much about the details. Just build something. Okay? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Definitely inspired me, probably inspired a lot of other people. We're going to take a break, 30-minute coffee break. See you again at 4 to explore the Polkadot Security Hub. See you again soon.